Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amanda Rose, and in today's video, we are finally going to be talking about station learning, specifically how I like to implement station learning in my classroom and what works for me since I feel like I have truly mastered stations. Now, before I get into the video, because it is jam-packed, I have a ton of tips for you. I talk about the pros, the cons, some prerequisites before you actually implement stations, but I also want to make it very clear that I would love for you guys to comment on my videos. I love that YouTube is such an interactive space, and the way that I get to interact with you guys the most is through commenting. So with any of my points, if something jumps out at you, if you've had a difficult time, if you've had a lot of success, please interact with me and each other in the comments below. That is one of the things that I love the most about YouTube, is being able to connect with you guys. And the best way to do that is, again, with comments. So let's get into today's video. I am going to share some tips and tricks on how to master station learning. I'm also going to show you some things that I do in my classroom. I can't show you everything, but I will show as much as I can so that you feel equipped and ready to tackle stations in your classroom as well. So before I get into my tips, I just want to set the stage for what exactly station learning is. For me, station learning is having about 5 to 6 different rotations or locations where students can learn about a particular topic in a very chunked way. Usually students are reading, writing, watching a video, or creating something within about a 10 to 12 minute block. Okay, that's the introduction. Now let's get into it for real this time, how I implement and master station learning. Number 1, you want to plan your learning goals. What exactly do you want students to get out of this station activity? Do you want them to focus on a skill? Are they answering an overall unit question? Is there a theme that you want them to explore or practice? What I love about station learning is that this can be implemented in any subject area. Although I am a social studies teacher, I truly believe that the tips that I am about to share can be used in any classroom. So for myself, what I like to do is have an overarching lesson question where my station learning will take about 3 to 4 days, depending on how many stations I implement. So for example, here are some lesson questions that I like to implement, and I'll also try to pop them on the screen. Number 1, in what ways did the new information discovered during the scientific revolution impact society? So now students have an overall arching question, and each station is going to focus on something different. Maybe one station is focusing on gravity, another station is focusing on the sun being the center of the universe. Each station focuses on something different that allows them to answer the lesson question. Here's another lesson question. This is for my 6th graders. Why was the Neolithic Revolution a significant turning point in world history? Overall, overarching question, and now each station is going to focus on helping them answer that question. I want you to think of stations as like chunking information. Instead of giving them one reading passage that they have to go over independently, how can you chunk documents? How can you chunk images? How can you chunk websites and kind of give it in bite-sized stations? So that's the first thing. You want to decide what are students doing during stations, and the way I like to approach it the most is by having an overall lesson question. Number 2, you want to design your stations. This is where all of the creativity happens. This is what I love the most. So here are some key ways that you can design your stations. I usually like to have 5 to 6 stations, and usually my 6th graders will take about 2 stations per period. Okay, so this is where I can stretch this out to be at least 3 days. Easy. Number 1, you can have collaborative stations. Are there questions that students have to answer that really focus on problem solving, them working together? I've even had students put an image together, like a puzzle piece, and then from there have to answer questions. Just something that makes it interactive, tactile, but again, most importantly, that they have to collaborate or answer together. Like doing this with a discussion station, maybe give them a quick little excerpt to read, and then give them about 4 to 5 discussion questions, and that station is just them discussing whatever questions you have provided. The second thing, independent practice, 100%. I like to include an independent station, usually 2 independent stations, because it minimizes talking within the classroom. If you have 5 to 6 different groups talking at the same time, it can get really loud, especially in these small New York City classrooms. So I like to implement at least 2 independent stations so that I know 2 groups are working silently so that it's not too much chatter. Third, a technology station, whether you want your students to watch a video together or maybe watch a video with their headphones, maybe want them to read an article from a website. I like having them use things like Google Earth or 3D visits to museums. Incorporate technology in some way, shape, or form. And the way I do that the most is by finding videos or things on YouTube or the internet, since every student in my classroom in our school has their own laptop. This is an easy way to make sure that everyone participates in the actual technology piece. Another one is a hands-on activity. Have students create something, whether they have to create something with a mold, whether they have to create an image of something that they just read about, whether they're creating sentences, but use a station where students really get to make something of their own, and then they get to compare it with each other. I like doing this for vocabulary. What is an image that really connects to a vocabulary word from that particular station? And then that way they can all share the different images that they came up with based on the vocabulary word they chose to focus on. Other stations, of course, are reading activities, having your students read an excerpt, and then they can go and answer certain questions together. I love also having students come up with their own questions in stations. What is a what, how, why, and in what ways question that you can come up with based on these stations here. You can also have a station that strictly focuses on annotations. How exactly did your students annotate a text based on certain guidelines and requirements? Okay, so let's pause right here. This is a good place to comment. What are some ways that you have used stations in your classroom? And if you've never used stations before and you're wondering if what you're thinking of right now could work in a station activity, write it down below and I would love to respond back to you guys. Third thing, stations require a lot of instructions. I like to just display something on my board all of the time so the students can refer back to it if they have any questions, right? You don't want to be running around like a chicken with no head because every group is asking you questions. You want to display it. I like to always put the instructions on the station paper, but also it can be on the board and they can know station 1 is group work, station 2 is group work, station 3 is independent. You're about to rotate in X amount of minutes, but you want all instructions super clear so that students know exactly what they're doing. I will say that stations takes a while for my students to get used to. I think by the second day, after 2 full rotations, then they are good to go. They're really getting used to it and then they really end up enjoying it. Number 4, organize your timing and your rotations. Do you want students walking around the room or do you want them sitting down, which is what I do, and have their papers rotate around the room? I like to place all materials for every station in a folder and I number the folders 1 through 6, and I like to sit my groups in kind of like a visual circle so that each group can just rotate the folder every time the timer goes off. For my 6th graders, I like to give about 10 to 12 minutes per station. And if I were doing this with my older students, normally I feel like 8 minutes works really well. But this really gives your students some time to digest the information, they're not rushing, and you may notice that you can actually change the time if you feel like one class is maybe getting through a station a lot faster versus another. So you can change those times and cater it based on your needs. Number 5, you want to group your students intentionally. I usually do not like to have more than 4 students in a group. Sometimes the number of a class, it just happens that way and I'll have 5, but I'd rather have 3 students than 5 students. But I would say 4 is the sweet spot. That way everyone really does feel like they're contributing. Sometimes 5 might be too many students where someone can really start to slack off on the side. Also, I like to group my students intentionally. Students sit in groups in my classroom, so I don't have to rearrange groups every time I do stations or any group activity. They sit with the people that I always want them to sit with, that I always want them to work with. And so I configure my classroom in groups for every single lesson. That way I don't have to worry about grouping. Also, at the end of every learning station, I have the lesson question at the bottom. This works like a dream for my middle school students. This way, it helps them with their thinking. If I'm doing a learning activity about the scientific revolution and I'm asking how a particular invention or discovery impacted the lives of the people back then or even today, at the end of every station, I'm going to ask that question. At first, it might confuse the students because a lot of times they'll say, I answered this already. And I'm like, right, but your answer may be different depending on the information in this particular station. That way, students are able to really organize their thoughts so that at the end, day 3 or day 4, I have them write an extensive written response answering the learning question, and then they get to go back to all of their 6 station responses. Well, I said it impacted the people in this way, it impacted them in this way, and then they're able to kind of just collect their responses over the last 3 days and write their official response for that final day. So that is how I implement stations. I think that the biggest part is the creativity with tip 2, making sure that you're introducing different skills, themes, ideas throughout each station. That is really like the best part of station learning. Okay, so now let's get into some benefits, some cons, and also some prerequisites. Before I share why I love stations so much, I want you to pause and I want you to write down, based on everything that I just shared in this video, what are some benefits that you see in organizing your days like this? Okay. Write it down in the comments. Okay, now here we go. One major benefit for me is that it lessens my planning time. Now, initially, planning stations is a lot of work. You guys just heard it, 5 to 6 different things that the students are doing, coming up with various questions, etc. But once you have a format that works, it is great. And this is taking about 3 to 4 days of your week. So you do all the planning on the back end, but then from Monday through Thursday, Tuesday through Friday, whatever the case may be, you can just sit back, give them out their folders, tell them to take out their station papers, and just watch the magic happen and have them rotate every 10 minutes. Another benefit is that it is student-centered. I give them everything that they need and they teach each other. That is probably the best part. I cannot tell you how many times I do a recap at the end of a station lesson, and usually I like to ask 3 core things. What's one thing you learned from your station activity? What's one thing that surprised you? What was your favorite station activity and why? And then 4th, I like to end with the lesson question and hear different students respond. This way, you really get a sense of how successful certain stations were, if there were any misconceptions with any of the stations. But this is truly what I love, because students walk away with knowledge and I'm like, I didn't have to say it. I didn't have to say it. They didn't have to sit there and listen to me until their face turned blue. Like, they are teaching and learning together, which is probably my favorite part. 3rd thing, stations really do target every single type of learner. Students who love to work together, students who love to work independently, skills, annotation, vocabulary, critical thinking, problem solving, creation, every single thing that you would like to add into a lesson, stations really allows you to do every single one of those and more. There really is no limit to station activities, which is why I truly love them so much. I get to be creative, but then I also get to see the students come up with really amazing things in class as well. Now, what are some possible cons to station learning? Or if you've tried station learning and you do feel like you're not having the best experience, I want you to write down what are some issues that you have found with station learning, and I would love to respond to you. Here are some cons for me. One, the back planning of it all. I can spend hours finding the right resources. I can spend hours coming up with questions. And because I enjoy doing stations so much, sometimes I actually have to talk myself out of trying something else, doing something else, adding another station. So pulling back for me is probably the hardest part. Number two, you will have some reluctant students who never want to work in groups. And unfortunately, station activities require them to work in groups. So really having student buy-in, hey, I know this, you're not really a fan of group work, but an independent station is coming up. It's 2 stations away. You'll have some time to separate yourself from your classmates and work independently. Really the give and take and the rationale and reasoning with students will help a lot. Final con, I do think that stations can get a little redundant. So this is not something that I do every day, and it's also not something I do every week. I do a station activity once per unit, and I think we have about maybe 6 to 7 units for the 6th grade. So about 1, maybe 2. I love to do stations with Asian China, but it's not something I'm doing all the time. So it is an activity where students get to look forward to it. They get to look forward to the independence. They get to look forward to the conversations that they get to have in the class versus them just working on something independently all the time. So I will say that if you're implementing stations all the time, it can get boring. It can get a lot on the student and on yourself. You want stations to feel like a treat. We get to do stations next week. That is really how I implement it in my classroom. But that's really it. Those are the only cons that I have. I have seen stations work so well in my classroom that it's really hard for me to see any other cons. So I would be interested to know from you guys what exactly you think. And lastly, prerequisites. I do not just give my students the stations, here's your rotation, go. I always do a day 1 of just background information. If we're learning about Emperor Shi Huangdi, we're learning about how he conquered China. Maybe I'm showing them a video overall. We're talking about introductions. Hey, you're going to learn about the Great Wall of China. You're going to learn about the Terracotta Army. You're going to learn about the unification of China. Whatever the case may be, I like to give an introductory lesson. That lesson is the first day. They usually have a short reading, maybe some guided questions, annotations, and then the next day I like to give them stations. I never just start with stations, and I like to know, okay, I've set the stage so that they are aware of what they're going to learn throughout these next 3 days. So that is also how I like to set it up, just in case you guys wanted to know. That's everything. If you love my content, if you are interested in more videos like this, please make sure that you give this video a thumbs up, that you also subscribe to my channel. The thumbs up really helps my channel grow. I want other teachers out there to hear my tips and tricks, so please help me out by liking this video and also by subscribing if you are not yet a new subscriber. All right, you guys, I will see you in the next one. Good luck if you are currently already teaching, and for those of us like me who are about to start in about a week or so, I hope that you have a really great school year.